effect of those cold temperatures on an exposed human body. And you could find out that first of all, you'd get goosebumps, and then you'd get frostbite on parts of your body. And if you were there long enough, you would die from hypothermia. But you would still not really know what sub-zero temperatures were like unless and until you traveled to Siberia in January and stood outside with nothing on. Then you would truly understand what sub-zero temperatures were all about. And so likewise, if you really want to know about the conditions on Earth and you want to experience them, you really have to be incarnate into a physical body and try them out firsthand. So that seemed to make sense to me. So I said, well, you mentioned, Albert, that before we incarnated, we planned our lives. We created life plans. Tell me how that works. He said, well, we each create a life plan which sets out the major circumstances of our lives and the major events that we want to encounter. And we plan that with a view to encounter the things that we need to experience in order to help us with our evolution. So life plans will have things like who our parents are, our siblings, our aunts and uncles, our friends, our co-workers, our spouses. We'll pick out our names, the places that we'll be born, the schools we'll go to, the languages we learn, all those major things. But the life plans don't set out everything in our lives. There's lots of gaps left there that we have to fill in as we live our lives. And he explained that life plans are prepared in conjunction with all the other souls that we'll interact with when we're on Earth. So like your close relatives and your friends and the other people that'll be a major part of your life, they have to agree to be part of your life, and you have to agree to be part of their life. And so there's a major sort of intermingling of life plans on the other side, which just made sense to me because it seems strange if you could go up to another soul on the spirit side and say, hey, I'm planning my life, and guess what? I'd like you to be my husband. You know, I mean, there has to be some agreement there. And the saving feature about these life plans is that Albert says that there's a council of wise ones on the other side who oversee all the life plans for all incarnations on Earth. And they're very wise people. They've been around a long time, and they will review every life plan to make sure that it's not too difficult or too ambitious or, in fact, too easy. And it sort of meets your needs as a soul for your evolution. So the other thing about life plans that he mentioned is that because when you're on Earth, you have free will to take actions and make decisions, and because you're not allowed to remember what's in your life plan, you're very often going to stray off course and make a wrong turn. And that's just all part of the challenge of being a human on Earth. And the reason we're not allowed to remember what's in our life plans is that would make it too easy. It would be like a teacher giving you the questions and answers to a final exam before the exam. There'd be no point in writing it. But we're not left to sort of flounder around on Earth blindly because we do have some help. Every one of us has several spirit guides. And these spirit guides stay with us through our lives on Earth. And they are our coaches. And they're there to try to guide us down the right path, which is the path that we've chosen in our life plan. And so every time you come to a decision point, you come to a fork in the road, these spirit guides are there to try to nudge you in the right direction. The difficulty is that most of the time, our spirit guides do not communicate directly with us like Albert was talking to me. Their messages are very subtle. They will give you messages as an intuitive thought that pops into your mind, as a gut feeling, as a whisper in your mind, as a coincidental event, or a synchronicity. And the problem is that most humans just don't hear these messages all the time, because our minds are full of other thoughts about our day-to-day activities. And so we have trouble hearing the messages and understanding where they come from. And sometimes, even when we hear them, our minds will rationalize a different course of action and dismiss what our guides are telling us, and we'll just take a different course of action. So that is the major challenge for humans, is to learn to hear the messages and follow what they're telling us. So then I said to Albert, okay, well, I understand all this, that seems to make sense, but tell me, where does the source fit into this? Because when I was a child, I was told that God chose our lives for us and that he controlled all the events in our lives. And he was like a master puppeteer up there in heaven, pulling the strings and making things happen. And Albert said, no, that just does not happen. The source does not control the events in our lives or anyone else's life. He said that means that if something tragic happens to you or to a loved one, you can't blame the source because the source had nothing to do with it. So he gave an example. He said, if a young child dies tragically in a car accident at a young age, he says there's no point for her parents to wave their fist angrily at God and say, God, why did you take my child from me at such a young age? She was a beautiful little child. She had her whole life ahead of her. And why did you do this? And the reason they shouldn't do that is because God, the source, didn't have anything to do with it. Albert said the reality is that in that example, the soul of that little girl decided it was time to exit. And now she's back on the spirit side, living very happily, knowing that she'll be reunited with her parents when they cross over themselves. And I said, well, Albert, I'm a bit puzzled by that. Why would somebody incarnate into a human body on Earth for only 6 years? What would be the point? He said, there's a point to every life on Earth. Whether it be for 6 years or 100 years, there's always something to be learned and something to be experienced. And he said in the case of the little girl who died at the age of 6, possibly it was because her soul only needed 6 years of life on Earth to learn what she wanted to learn or to experience in this life. Or maybe the soul of that little girl didn't come here to learn anything. Maybe she came here and volunteered to be the child so that her parents could learn the life lessons that they needed to learn. I said, well, that's very comforting, Albert, and you know, that would be of great comfort to people who've lost somebody tragically, lost a loved one tragically in an accident. And why aren't you telling the whole world? Why aren't you telling everyone in the world what you just told me? Because it would be very helpful to everyone in the world. And he says, oh, I intend to. He says, because you're going to write a book. So I'm sure that my jaw dropped a bit. And I said, well, you know, I'd never ever thought before in my life of writing a book. I mean, I was a lawyer. I said, Albert, why would you choose a rank amateur like me to write your book? Why wouldn't you pick an accomplished author like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling? He says, I have my reasons, and there's no point in getting into them right now. I'll explain this all to you in the spirit side. In the meantime, stop your whining, suck it up, and start your book. So then I started thinking about what Albert said about the example of the little girl and her soul deciding it was time to go. And I said, Albert, does this mean that our souls choose when we die? And he says, absolutely. He says, no one dies by accident. We die when our souls decide it is time to leave. He says, in our life plans that we prepared on the spirit side before we're born, we all build in 5 or 6 exit points for us to leave. And as we live our lives, our soul then decides which exit point to take to leave the incarnation. And that decision is based upon what have we experienced so far, what else do we have to learn, are we ready to go? And he says sometimes those exit points will even be changed as life goes on, because your soul can actually change and modify your life plan once you're born. So he had to it was hard for me to understand this concept about us choosing when we die, because I had obviously had a skeptical look on my face. And I said, do you mean to tell me that when a plane crashes and all 300 people on board die, that those 300 souls all chose to exit at the same time? And he said, yes, absolutely. Well, I still had to think about that one a bit. And then I tried to test him a bit. My lawyer brain kicked in again, and I said, well, that's a little bit much to swallow, because you've told us that I have free will on earth, everyone else has free will, and none of us remember what's in our life plans. So every day I interact with people at home, my neighbors, at work, traveling to and from work. And how is it that sometimes all these free wills won't somehow clash and end up causing an accident which could cause my death before my soul was ready? Am I there? Yeah. Albert says, we have an answer for that. Everyone has several special spirits, which many people call guardian angels, to watch over us. And their job is to make sure that if events on earth might lead to an accident or to a premature death, that they will actually intervene to stop that. And they do that to make sure that your soul is the one who chooses when to leave, so that there's no accidental deaths. And he said their intervention can be in many ways. It could be something subtle, like a strong, intuitive message in your head as you're leaving for work, telling you to take a different route to work, thereby avoiding an accident on your usual way to work. And sometimes, he says, they will actually intervene physically, and they will try to do this as discreetly as possible. So the example he gave me is, he said, imagine you're sitting at an intersection at a red light waiting for it to turn green. He said your guardian angels may manipulate the timing sequence of those traffic lights so that the red light stays red for an extra 5 seconds. That means that you will not be in the next intersection at the same time as someone running the red light, thereby avoiding a collision. And he said, most of the time these things happen and we're not even aware of it, but they're there to make sure that your soul gets the ultimate choice of when you die. So then I said to Albert, well, okay, I'll have to think about that one, but let me ask you this. So when we make our exit, where does the source fit into all this? Because when I was raised as a child, I was told that when I died, I would have to go before God, and God would judge me. And if I was good, he would send me to heaven where I could live forever in peace and love. And if I was bad, he'd send me to hell. Albert said, that just doesn't happen. He says, the soul does not make rules for us to follow. The source doesn't. And the source does not judge us and does not punish us if we broke any of his rules. That means, in effect, that even murderers and terrorists go to the spirit side after they die. And I said to Albert, to most people on earth, that would seem to be an unjust result. Why would somebody bad, like a murderer, get to go to the same place as Mother Teresa after he dies? He said, it's because you're looking at things from an earthly perspective. Are we there? Okay. Yeah, I think we're okay, yeah. He said, once you're back on the spirit side and you understand exactly how life on earth works, you will understand this and it'll all make sense to you. In the meantime, you'll just have to take my word for it. So I said, well, okay, the source isn't going to judge me. will anybody else on the spirit side judge me? He said, no one will judge you but yourself, because after you cross over, you will undergo what we call a life review. And in the life review, you'll get to go back over everything that happened to you in your life. And you'll be able to see it, either reliving it as the first person, or you can relive it as a third party, like you're watching a movie. And just like a football coach and his players watching the game films, after the game, you can stop the action, you can rewind it, you can watch it in slow motion, you can watch it from any angle you want. And it's designed to let you know how you made your mistakes, what you could have done to avoid your mistakes, and how your actions affected everyone else on earth. And the interesting thing about the life review, Albert said, is that you actually get to see not only how you acted in your life, but you get to see how other people felt when you reacted with them. So, for example, if you said some mean and cruel things to someone, you'll actually get to feel the hurt that they felt when you said those words. So it's really quite a learning experience. And he said, life reviews are not designed to make you feel guilty or make you feel bad or regret what you've done. It's really a learning tool so that you can understand what happened during your life and the lessons that you learned, the lessons you didn't learn. And this is all a matter of helping you prepare yourself for your next incarnation. So so far this is all so good. But I said, you've basically taken me full circle now, Albert. I started off on the spirit side, lived my life, and now I've crossed over. But I still have a bit of a nagging doubt about the death process. I know I'm going to end up back on the spirit side, but I have a concern about the dying process. I said to Albert, will it be painful? Will I be in distress? Will I feel fearful or anxious? Like, what will happen during the crossing over process? He said, not to worry. He said, the crossing over process is actually very pleasant.